lots of fans watching him back home as the underdog, looking to take down the standard master, one of the greats in the game, in Brad Nelson, who's looking to stop him from doing exactly that. Let's get a deep dive on our feature match coming up here with Day 9 and Cedric.
Thank you so much, Maria. I gotta be honest, this is such a funny looking match when you think about it. Matias having to go through just so many people to get here, had a grueling day one, barely made the cut. And from Brad, we've seen 2 best of 3s.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Because Brad was so highly ranked in MPL, skipped day 1 on to day 2, went to win in an unfavored matchup, won again in an unfavored matchup.
Yep.
And he, I actually think, generally speaking, is unfavored again, and yet I'm sure he'll probably pull some miracle plays off.
It's not as bad as his matchups were against Esper Control. I think he's actually probably somewhat comfortable in the Simic Nexus matchup. Here's the thing about Brad. Even though he's got some bad cards in this particular matchup, once again, I'm going to point towards Elite Guard Mage and Hostage Taker, where Brad took a risk, and it's 0 for 3 on those risks playing those cards this weekend. He's still overcome both of those things up against him. You know, again, there are matchups where Elite Guard Mage and Hostage Taker are fantastic. This is another one where it's not really the case. That said, there's plenty of interaction with Thought Eraser, Planeswalkers. Matias' deck still has some severe difficulty, with Teferi Time Raveler and Narset Parter of Veils.
Yeah.
As good as the Simic Nexus can be, Day 9.
Let's go ahead and just do a deep dive on Matias' deck, where really the 2 key cards are up in the top right, the Wilderness Reclamation, down in the bottom left, the Nexus of Fate, generating a whole bunch of extra mana, taking a whole bunch of extra turns in a row. And there's a number of different ways that you can then close the game out. There is a single copy of Nissa, Who Shakes the World, and a single copy of Callous Dismissal. These wind up being the 2 ways to actually win the game.
Well, once you actually have, you know, your thing going, your engine online with Wilderness Reclamation and Nexus of Fate, how you win the game is pretty inconsequential. A card that's going to play a huge role in things here is Tamiyo, Collector of Tales, which there are only 3 copies of. In some deck lists, we see 4. The main reason for that is as Brad tries to poke holes in what Matias is doing via discard, Tamiyo is going to allow you to either get those cards back with the minus ability or plus to actually find the cards that are missing. Keep your eyes on that one as those games unfold.
Now, Brad's deck really is trying to do 2 things. In the first few turns, Hero of Precinct 1 up in the top right, building up some board pressure, following it up with some other ground units, Hostage Taker, and then the flying Elite Guild Mage. Those 3-cost Planeswalkers are there for a little bit of utility, there to slow the game down for the opponent with the denial for Narset. Doesn't allow the opponent to draw too many extra cards. Teferi Time Raveler doesn't allow your opponent to do much at all.
Well, that's the best card in the matchup here for Brad is Teferi Time Raveler
undeniably
against a Wilderness Reclamation deck. Narset's going to do a nice job of things too. And of course, you're mentioning that quick clock from Hero of Precinct 1. If you're Brad, you're hoping to not draw too many of your cards that are poor in this matchup. That is, again, Elite Guard Mage, Hostage Taker, and some of those pinpoint removal spells. And you're also really hoping not to draw Command the Dreadhorde. There will be some spots where it's okay, but it's not really for this matchup. That's, of course, game 1. Once you get to game 2 and game 3, and I'm sure Marshall and Paul will go over this, there are going to be plenty of cards for Brad to sideboard out, plenty of good cards for Brad to sideboard in. I'll say this, if Brad's able to win game 1, I think he's going to win the match, but I think he'll start down again.
It really comes down heavily to how much of an impact Baby Teferi can have, Teferi Time Raveler. It shuts down so many of the plays of the Simic Nexus deck. Now, we've gotten the chance to see many of Matias' games throughout the weekend, but once again, Brad, we've only seen 2 best of 3s. So to just give you a little more exposure to the fine gentleman, we got the chance to talk to Brad Nelson.
My name is Brad Nelson, and I just moved from Roanoke, Virginia, all the way to Renton, Washington. I was one of the lucky division winners in the Magic Pro League Weekly. I went 7-0 in the Emerald Division, so I don't even have to play on day 1. So a lot of people think that I adapted beautifully to each metagame during MPL Weekly, but the truth is I just picked a deck randomly each week and just got lucky and won all of my matches. But here I am. Is there anyone that's flat out better than me at this event? Yes, many people, but for some reason I still beat them. One of the craziest things about Magic is knowing that you could play for the rest of your life and not win a tournament. And so winning anything this big is the reason I play this game.
I know a lot of competitors relate to that feeling where you can enter into tens, hundreds of major tournaments and never mark a win. I mean, these fields are just so competitive.
No, they absolutely are. Now, Brad's picked up quite a few wins over his Magic career, a lot of top 8 finishes, Grand Prix titles, Pro Tour top 8s, all of that good stuff. He is known as the best standard player in the world. Him doing well in MPL Weekly in the first split doesn't surprise me one bit. I know he's very humble and self-depreciating, saying, you know, I just picked the deck that I like the most.
Yeah.
Look, I've known Brad for over a decade. Brad works really hard in his deck selection, just like he did for this tournament. And what's the best part about Brad, very quickly before we get to this match, is he finds ways to win where most people don't. He said he did not want to play against Esper Control. He's beaten it twice. We could argue that this is a bad matchup as well, but much like with LeBron James in basketball, I don't bet against Brad Nelson in Standard. I wouldn't be shocked if he won this match, man.
Well, it's time to find out who will be advancing into top 4. Let's get into the match.
Thank you, Day 9. That's right. One of these players is going to get a win and end, so let's welcome them to the stage. First, we have from Argentina with the top 8 Nationals 2010 under this belt, the underdog, Matias Leveratto. And he says it's luck, but we know it's all skill. One of the best players in Standard, it's Brad Nelson. And we've got Marshall Sutcliffe and Paul Cheon with this call.
Thank you, thank you, Becca. Excuse me. That is Paul Cheon and Marshall Sutcliffe. Wow, we, you know, Becca said it, the underdog here. You know, if you look at the top 16 players here in the field, even the ones that are in the challenger side of things are like Hall of Famers, champions of varying sorts, whether it be world champion or Pro Tour / Mythic champion, etc. Leveratto is the one name that stands out as the up-and-comer.
Yeah, you can say up-and-comer, but at the same time, Leveratto's been playing this game for a really long time. As Becca said, 2010 Argentinian national champion. So he's been playing for a long, long time, and it might just be a matter of, you know, him just getting an opportunity, and, you know, he's been making the most of it here.
Yeah, and that is the case that we've seen time and time again throughout history, is that one big break. Is this the big break for Matias Leveratto, or will the machine crush him? That is Brad Nelson sitting across from him. You know, what else can you say about Brad? He, like, in this, the grand scope of this season, meaning the MPL weekly matches and this tournament, just hasn't lost.
Yeah.
Just hasn't lost once.
He has not lost yet, and, you know, he is known to being one of the best standard players, but I think he has actually a very tough matchup ahead of him. I think the fact that he plays Hero Precinct 1 in his deck is definitely going to be in his favor. It's going to be much better than, for example, playing against Esper Control, which really puts no pressure. If Brad Nelson can get a hand like the one you see in his hand right here, where you can start out with a turn 2 Hero Precinct 1 followed by some disruption, he can try to kind of close the door before it gets to the late game where Leveratto can take over.
So what does a win look like for Leveratto? If, let's say that things go well on his side, what ends up happening at the end?
So what Leveratto wants to do is, you know, draw a Growth Spiral, establish, you know, lots of mana onto the battlefield, get Wilderness Reclamation in play, and then just start drawing a ton of cards.
Okay.
Cards like Chemist's Insight, flipping Search for Azcanta, or even getting Tamiyo going with Wilderness Reclamation. That's kind of what he wants to do. However, Brad has really strong ways to actually disrupt this as well, because he has cards like Teferi Time Raveler, which kind of single-handedly shuts off Reclamation. Not only can it bounce it, it also means that once it's in play, Leveratto can't leverage all that mana that he gets from Wilderness Reclamation to cast instants.
Interesting decision point real early here in the game. Turn 2 Thought Erasure from Nelson, and Leveratto with Growth Spiral in hand says, you know what, I'll let you choose. In fact, looks like he's chosen correctly, as it was Tamiyo hitting the graveyard there, and there's the Growth Spiral now after.
The nice thing about Leveratto's deck, though, is there's a lot of redundancy. Sure, Tamiyo is a really strong card, but he has lots of ways to just draw cards. Lots of Chemist's Insight, Tamiyo, Nissa. All those cards are just cards that he wants. So losing out on that Tamiyo is not a huge deal because he just has so many live draws.
He even found one, Nissa, who shakes the world off the top of the library. It will have to wait a turn, but if he can resolve that Planeswalker, well, things are really, really tough for Brad from that point on.
Yeah, and it looks like Brad now choosing to apply pressure here with Hero of Precinct 1. And he actually chose to go with turn 2 Thought Erasure over casting the Hero of Precinct 1. I think he basically wanted to make sure that Leveratto did not have kind of the ideal opening start of Growth Spiral into Wilderness Reclamation or Tamiyo.
Of course, Tamiyo shutting off the thought erasure, so it might have been get it while you can from Brad Nelson there. But here we go. Nissa, who shakes the world, hits the battlefield, and it looks like he may even try to assemble the combo here with Mobilize District.
Yeah, Mobilize District is now a 3/3. However, if Leveratto uses the mana to activate Mobilize District, that's a 6/6 Vigilance creature.
That's right. It does have 3+1/+1 counters on it, but yeah, currently a base 0/0. But like you said, he can make it into a 3/3, and oof, Mortify for Brad Nelson is going to send the Mobilize District packing. But Nissa still on the battlefield, even though she'll probably soak up 2 damage here.
Yeah, and Leveratto will have the option of playing Nexus of Fate next turn. Right now, he currently has access to 7 mana, and he also has the ability to untap with this, so he has access to 9 mana next turn.
That's the one Mortify in Brad's main deck there, by the way.
Oh, and this is perfect. He also gets to cast Search for Azcanta this turn.
Ooh.
So he can play Breeding Pool untapped, play Search for Azcanta off the Breeding Pool, then untap it, attack for 3, then cast Nexus of Fate. And in order to play Nexus of Fate, he does need to utilize one of his forests here and animate that. One thing, though, is I don't think Leveratto has enough cards in his graveyard, so we will not see Azcanta the Sunken Ruin next turn.
Yeah, he's only got a couple cards in his yard. But Breeding Pool is going to get animated and jam. Down to 14 goes Brad Nelson, and then there's the follow-up Nexus of Fate.
Look at Brad Nelson.
He's like, uh-oh. Growth Spiral, don't need it. Put that one in the graveyard. And there's Wilderness Reclamation. Now, doesn't have anything to do with it just yet, does he?
Yeah.
But he's close.
All the potential in the world.
That's
but
right.
He doesn't have the payoff effect. He does have it in play. You do see that Search for Azcanta. He does want to fill up his graveyard as quickly as possible to be able to flip it, then utilize the power of Wilderness Reclamation to activate Search for Azcanta twice in a turn.
Yeah, it's so powerful, so difficult to overcome, especially if you're sitting in Brad Nelson's seat where his deck is not super well set up to deal with that type of combo. In the meantime, Nissa, who shakes the world, is a win condition in and of herself. She's going to animate another land here, this time an island. In comes 6 power, and Brad Nelson's already down to 8. He does get to cast perhaps his most powerful spell, though, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria here on turn 5.
Yeah, and he's going to use it to get that Nissa off the battlefield. He's got a couple of chump blockers here. He can block the 3/3s, and this will slow down Leveratto. Leveratto can still, of course, draw a number of very powerful effects, but Brad might be, you know, if Leveratto draws a land here, then Brad gets to untap and get Teferi going, find more gold spells, and just find more chump blockers and threats so that he can maybe try to squeak this one out before Leveratto takes over with that Nissa.
Yeah, this gets interesting. Chemister's Insight is revealed on top of the library with Search for Azcanta. He does decide to draw it, but remember, he doesn't get that mana benefit that Nissa gave him before, so he's just down to 5.
Yeah, and I imagine Leveratto is going to start off here by attacking with his Vigilant lands at Teferi, force Brad Nelson to chump block with these tokens.
Mm-hmm. It's always important to pressure Teferi, as that is the type of card that every turn it sits on the battlefield can absolutely run away with the game. And you see Brad with a little head shake there. He's under immense pressure.
Yeah, and deciding whether or not he wants to put Hero of Precinct 1 in front of the Breeding Pool and chump blocking with the other creature, just because he wants to kind of stymie Leveratto's mana.
He did, in fact, do so. So Hero of Precinct 1 will meet its bitter end here, but not before Chemister's Insight gets cast for Leveratto, making sure to use up those lands properly. There's a Nissa, who shakes the world. The card in between was a Growth Spiral.
So 1 less mana available for Leveratto, given that Brad Nelson double blocked here.
And that Root Snare doesn't look super great here. Chemister's Insight gets cast again, thanks to the Wilderness Reclamation.
All right, so this is going to be a big turn for Brad. He needs to string some stuff together here. He does have a Narset, which does prevent card draw from Leveratto, but Leveratto has Search for Azcanta in play, which kind of plays around Narset's static ability.
I haven't seen him double check, but I do assume that that search for Azcanta is just about ready to flip here on Leveratto's next turn. And with this Stoddy ratio, it kind of has to.
Right, and if Leveratto's one short, he can even play a Growth Spiral on his upkeep to make sure that he has enough cards to flip that search for Azcanta.
So that Nissa that got put into the library there from Teferi has now been discarded.
Well, look at this. It looks like he's keeping Tyrant Scorn on top. And by doing that, he can plus Teferi, draw that Tyrant Scorn, play out Narset, get a card, use the untap effect of Teferi, and before it's Leveratto's turn, he can use Tyrant Scorn to kill the 3/3 land.
That is quite a sequence here for Brad Nelson. It wasn't looking good early, but when the dust settles on this, he will have actually whittled the resources here of Leveratto down significantly.
Oh, and he finds a Teferi Time Raveler too, so Leveratto might need to start getting things going quickly. So So now Leveratto has access to 8 mana next turn with the Wilderness Reclamation. However, doesn't have anything to do with it yet. If he finds a Nexus of Fate, that would be really, really strong. Chemist's Insight not going to do a whole lot with Narset Parter Veils in play.
So he's going to put it in the graveyard, and it's another Wilderness Reclamation.
I mean, that is a lot of additional mana here.
Yes.
He will be able to get multiple activations from Azcanta the Sunken Ruin next turn. But as you can see, Brad Nelson also found a Teferi Time Raveler here, so that will shut down the potential to play cards like Nexus of Fate, but that is not going to stop Leveratto from getting Azcanta the Sunken Ruin going multiple times.
Yeah, it looks like Leveratto's going to have to start gearing up for one huge turn. Well, there's a Nexus of Fate.
Oh, he can just cast it.
Can he really?
Yes,
oh,
he
because
found
of the
it.
second Wilderness.
No.
Oh,
This is going to be rough.
This is a disaster for Brad Nelson, who says, well, may as well have a sip of coffee here.
Well, not much else you can do here.
Nope. So here's Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, and there's another Nexus of Fate. Uh-oh. There we go.
Then we're going to see Gross, but it's not even going to draw him a card, but it's going to put an additional land into play, which is just more mana with those 2 Wilderness Reclamations in play.
Yeah, the funny part is that he'd prefer to save it to play on Brad's turn, but Brad isn't getting a turn for a little while.
Oh, you can tell this is a man who appreciates value. He's like, nope, I don't want to get that extra mana. I want to be able to draw that card later.
That's right. So Azcanta the Sunken Ruin hits another Nexus of Fate. Now, the interesting part here, though, is he's not doing anything just yet with these Nexus of Fate.
But every single turn, he's just finding more cards. I mean, this is how this deck takes over the game, and this is going to be really difficult for Brad Nelson.
Ooh, there's an Opt.
Yeah.
Growth Spiral and Opt in hand. Not doing a whole lot here.
Still looking for cards here. Oh, Tamiyo is another way to search for additional copies of Nexus of Fate here.
Yeah, that's right, without actually drawing them. But he is going to have to pass the turn to himself here because it's like he ran out of mana for Tamiyo.
Yep, and Brad is scooping it up. He knows. I mean, he is very familiar with this matchup. He's just taking way too many turns. Every single turn, he draws a card and gets to basically use a Narset ability twice, or 3 times rather. So Brad knows that it's just so unlikely for him to take over from that spot. But wow, that was a huge find. Wow. Nexus of Fate, because Brad was on the brink of stabilizing there with that Teferi Time Raveler.
It looked pretty bad for Brad, and then all of a sudden it was like he did it again. He found his way out of a sticky spot, and all of a sudden...
Look at, he brought his entire sideboard in. But this is kind of what we expected. This is going into this matchup, we expected Leveratto to be favored game 1.
Yeah.
I think after sideboard, Brad can take out a lot of his bad removal, replace it with more disruptive elements, additional copies of Duress, counter magic, things like that. So I think it does get a lot more even after sideboard, but Leveratto does seem to be, a decently sized favorite game 1.
Yeah, Cedric said over at the analyst desk that he thought if Brad could steal game 1, he would be in a great position to win, but he said, I don't think he's going to.
Right.
And you can see why.
And it looks like Leveratto is going with the shaving a bunch of cards approach here. It looks like there's -1 Nexus, losing a couple of Chemist's Insights because drawing multiple of those with Narset in play is pretty bad, cutting a Wilderness Reclamation, trying to speed up his game plan actually a little bit with 4 copies of Paradise Druid as well, instead of the Growth Spirals. And it makes sense. If you expect your opponent to board out a lot of removal, all of a sudden Paradise Druid is just a very solid mana source.
All right, game number 2 upon us. And just to set the stage here, by the way, these players being in the upper bracket are playing for top 4. Everything on the line here to make it to the last day of competition. The good news is it having won today in both of their prior matches, they are they're in a position where they can actually take a loss and still live to fight. So,
yep.
Still, what a huge victory for either of these players. For Brad, it's just easy mode, right? He did all the heavy lifting for the MPL Weekly. They just came in here and just ran his way straight through with no losses. But boy, he's got his work cut out for him with the newcomer, at least to this level of Magic, Matias Leveratto.
Yeah, ideal start here, starting out with that Hero Precinct 1. Put some early pressure on the opposition. Brad certainly wants to find some kind of hand disruption here to go with that. He does have a Narset here, but Leveratto does have Negate here in hand for at least the first copy of Narset Parter Veils. And you know he's going to just slam that Negate onto the table. Oh, never mind. He's letting the Narset resolve here and choosing to ramp up instead here. By playing the Growth Spiral, he does get to play double Paradise Druid next turn, giving him 7 mana the turn after.
Had to be tempting to put Mobilized District on the battlefield there. That can actually threaten Narset with the land drop here, though it does kind of show your hand.
Right. And Blast Zone was a really nice draw here from Leveratto, because as you can see in Brad's hand, he's got Teferi and Narset. And now Brad has the ability, Leveratto has the ability to use that Blast Zone to get rid of both Narset and Teferi once Teferi hits play.
Narset minuses once again. It's like it's not loud enough for Leveratto. In the meantime, Brad is the one making the decision here. He's minus Narset and should be looking at those 4 cards, deciding if there's one that he wants the most.
Yeah, it looks like he has several strong options to choose from here because he's been in the tank for a little bit here. And Leveratto playing it slow, letting that Narset resolve.
It looks like he went for Thought Erasure.
Oh, but choosing to just continue applying pressure here and playing the Elite Guard Mage instead. And not a whole lot of action here from Leveratto. Just a lot of mana creatures. You got some Paradise Druids here, but you know all he's got is a Negate and a Nexus of Fate. He really needs to find some way to kind of get ahead on cards. Wants to really find something like a Tameo.
The Blast Zone a little awkward here, as Brad's got a 0, a 2, a 4, and a 3.
Right. And I think he doesn't want to show the Blast Zone unless he absolutely has to. So he might wait until Brad runs out to Teferi. Unless he's interested in just putting the counters right away onto the Blast Zone. But it feels to me like, given the mana that he has available to him, playing out a couple of Paradise Druids and then keeping him Negate is what he wants to be doing here. You know, he wants to have that Negate for a potential Teferi Hero of Dominaria next turn.
That's a plan.
That Brad could have.
Brad says, hey, triple Paradise Druid. You can just do it that way.
So now Brad has a couple options here. He can lead with Teferi Time Raveler or Thought Erasure. I imagine it's going to be Thought Erasure here. Get that Negate out of the way, then play Teferi. Then it's going to be really tough for Leveratto to play around the 3-mana Planeswalkers. Of course, we know that there is a Blast Zone in his hand to deal with. To handily deal with the Planeswalkers, Thought Erasure cannot take lands.
My question is the damage done? Sure, you can get rid of the Planeswalkers, but it's kind of the used up.
Right.
You know, it's the minused Planeswalkers in many cases where you're happy to have the answer to get rid of them for their static abilities, but goodness sakes, look at Brad's hand. He's got 6 cards in his hand right now.
Yeah, and this is the tough turn here for Brad. Now he has a couple of options. He can either play Thought Erasure here or Teferi. Let's see what he goes with. Leveratto did cast a Negate, so it does signal that he might have something very powerful in hand. So Brad fires off the Thought Erasure, get that Nexus of Fate out, and now Leveratto has nothing.
You heard Brad kind of joke, well, that's a plan, I guess, with the Paradise Druids, but currently that is Leveratto's plan, and it looks horrendous against all these 1/1s. He just has nothing going on. In fact, Brad's going to start attacking.
Leveratto needs a buy. Oh, I was going to say, he beat me to the punch. I was like, that's the exact card that he wants to draw. It's the perfect card. Take a look at Brad Nelson's hand. He doesn't really have any removal spells. He has a Teferity bounce a token. And how much mana does he have here? He actually has the ability to play Ooze and make an Ooze this turn.
He does. That was a dirty top deck. And Brad Nelson's like anything but that.
Wow.
Biogenic Ooze off the
perfect card.
Perfect draw for Leveratto. And now Brad Nelson with a head shake has his hands well and truly full. That was 9 power and 9 toughness from one card.
That was unbelievable. I mean, I think that was the best possible card you could have drawn in that spot.
Wow. Leveratto looks nonplussed, but I can tell that Brad is in intense mode. He was just facing down 3 Paradise Druids with a land in hand for his opponent, and now all of a sudden his entire game plan just went right in the blender because Biogenic Ooze is threatening to completely dominate this board.
I mean, he did say that was the plan, right? You got a bunch of mana in play, time to draw something expensive.
Yep.
That's exactly what he did. Next turn, he now has the ability to pump out 2 more Oozes a turn, and Brad needs to find an answer to this Biogenic Ooze.
Yeah, you said expensive, powerful, whatever. That was effectively 9 mana worth of effect. And
and he finds it!
What did he find?
D-Spark off the Narset means he has an answer to the Ooze. The 3/3s are not that problematic. So Brad also with a timely find here. Of course, Narset digs you a little bit deeper. And
wow.
Now Leveratto is I'm going to say he's behind again here. He's got some 3/3s in play, but Brad can just put some tokens in front of the Oozes. He's got that Elite Guard Mage for a double block with a 1/1. So Leveratto doesn't really have any great attacks here.
Right back at you, says Brad Nelson, and Leveratto thought, wow, I thought I had maybe drawn out of this.
And Brad just has so many ways, so many additional ways to kind of find cards here, right? He's got that Narset in play, which can minus again this turn. He can drop another Narset for additional digging, and then he even has a Teferi Time Raveler to draw an additional card and kill an Ooze.
Is the Mobilized District going to get fired up here?
All right, plan B, let's go.
It certainly is. And 3 different 3/3s attacking Narset, Parter, Avails here. Brad, though, seems to be in the driver's seat. He's the one who has all the great blocking options available to him.
Yeah, there's going to be a chump block on each of the 3/3s, and then the Guard Mage and the 1/1 should go in front of the Mobilized District.
That's exactly what happens. This will leave Leveratto down a Mobilized District, but Narset, Parter, Avails will stay on the battlefield, even though Brad lost 2 tokens and a Guard Mage.
And it does not look like Leveratto has something like a Hydroid Crisis here to dump all his mana into.
He needs something like that, right? Like that's, again, just any big expensive Haymaker could get him right back into this.
Although I guess he wouldn't be able to draw cards because Narset, Parter, Avails is in play.
So that isn't a great one. And then now that I mention it, there's also Dovin's Veto, so that takes away a few more Haymakers.
I think actually he just wants another Biogenic Ooze, honestly.
Yeah, that was really the best draw for him before. But another D-Spark in hand here for Nelson.
Yeah, Nelson basically has all the angles covered here. Any non-creature spell off the top he can veto. Biogenic Ooze he can D-Spark. He has the ability to Thought Erasure at instant speed with Teferi, so it's going to be really, really difficult here for Leveratto. He just hasn't drawn a way to get ahead on cards this game.
Nexus of Fate is fine, but there are answers once the Blast Zone goes away.
And even if he casts Nexus of Fate this turn, I don't think Brad's going to actually counter it. He's just going to let it resolve because it really has done nothing. It's not going to do anything.
It's just draw a card.
Yeah. So I imagine the 3/3 is going to make an attempt at killing one of these Planeswalkers.
Just to force Brad to react in some way.
Right. He might just put 3 of the tokens in front of it or just chump block with 1.
But of course, if Leveratto really wants, he can use Blast Zone.
Right. And it's possible Brad just lets this happen because he has an extra copy of Narset in hand.
So there it is. Ooze token attacks Narset, and Brad's more than happy to trade off material on board, in this case 3 1/1 soldiers for the 3/3 Ooze. He knows he's going to be getting more soldiers. Look at his hand. Gold card, gold card, gold card, and then a 4th gold card there with that Hero of Precinct 1, and really no way for it to go away. Brad's going to take a little tank here and see, do I need to do anything about this Nexus of Fate?
Interested to see what he does here.
I'm curious as well. He may also just not have that many great targets for it full stop. So he does fire off Dovin's Veto, which gets him another 1/1 and of course secures his turn. And there's a second copy of Oath of Kaya into hand for him. But once again, if we just take a little snapshot here, it's triple Paradise Druid and nothing else going on for Leveratto.
Right, and Brad now has the ability to play out Thought Erasure on Leveratto's draw step with that +1 ability from Teferi Time Raveler. I imagine that's what he's going to go for here. Another thing he could consider is maybe using Oath of Kaya to kill that tapped Paradise Druid that's in play.
Yeah, it looks like that's going to be the plan. So Paradise Druid down. Brad back up to 26 life. Hasn't really had his life total attack. There's a Narset Parter of Veils, but combo. We've got the Teferi Time Raveler plus Thought Erasure on the draw step means that Narset is not going to be there to help find Leveratto action. Boy, he could have used that too.
Absolutely, and Leveratto might just be looking to sacrifice the Blast Zone here. Maybe he'll do it end of turn, but he does want to get those pesky Planeswalkers off the battlefield. The reason to do it now is to deny Brad the opportunity of basically playing another hand disruption spell at instant speed during his draw step, because he really needs to try to find something and resolve it.
He also got that first copy of Oath of Kaya kind of for free there as well, though.
Right.
With Brad with another copy, it's not a huge deal. Speaking of another copy, there's Narset Parter of Veils number 2 on the battlefield for Brad Nelson. Brad fighting for top 4, but he finds himself down a game against Matias Leveratto, and well, things are going pretty well for him here. He needs them to keep doing so, and then he needs that to happen again.
Right. Getting in every single point of damage as possible, keeping the 2 tokens back to trade with the Narset Parter Veils.
Well, I was going to say there's a little bit of hope for Leveratto, but it is a very, very small amount of hope. He can crack that on Brad's turn to draw 1 card. That's where we're at here.
And you are just kind of seeing here how the dynamic of the matchup shifts after sideboard here. Brad now with just having the ability to find so many relevant cards for this matchup, after cutting some of the poor cards that he had in his main.
Brad's really starting to run away with this again, thanks to the Planeswalkers on his side of the battlefield. Now he's got the trio, double Teferi plus a Narset. This may be one of the last draw steps we get here from Leveratto.
And now Brad again has the ability to play Duress on Leveratto's draw step here, as he found another Teferi Time Raveler. Yep.
And it's a negate, and he doesn't even want to show Brad that negate, so he's going to scoop him up. And that is game number 2 going to Brad Nelson. Not so easy in these post-sideboarded games, and we're going to get a game 3 decider. One of these 2 players will be in the top 4 after this game.
Yeah, that was an extremely timely D-Spark. Brad really needed to get that one going on that specific turn because Leveratto had the ability to make 2 additional oozes, and then all of a sudden he would have had over 20 power on the battlefield.
One good draw deserves another. And you could see the look on Brad's face, by the way, when Leveratto played that Biogenic Ooze, because remember, he had seen his hand the turn prior, so he knew that was just freshly ripped off the top of the library, and he was like, anything but that.
Right.
But then again, there's Narset digging around, finding a D-Spark, and deep breath, gentlemen. It is time for game number 3 between our 2 players. And you can see them both dialing in and getting focused, because this has everything on the line. Top 4 at stake.
Yeah, winner advancing, locking up the top 4. Loser still has a chance to make it into the top 4, as it is a double elimination tournament, and both these players are undefeated on the day.
Okay, Brad is going to lean heavily on duress here. He keeps a 2-spell, 5-land opener, but there's Teferi Time Raveler for turn 3. Brad's deciding if he needs to duress straight away, and the answer is yes, I'm going to do that.
Leveratto really wants to find an untapped land here so he can run out that Paradise Druid. Kept kind of an awkward opener with Simic, Guildgate, and Memorial to Genius. 2 tap lands here, not allowing him to play that turn 2 Paradise Druid.
Oof, he did not hit. Now he's hitting his land drop with the Memorial of Genius, but not getting that Paradise Druid down could come back to haunt him. One of the benefits that he has with this Paradise Druid sideboard plan is explosiveness, and missing it on turn 2 certainly sets you back.
Drawing that land was really big for Leveratto, though.
Seriously.
He now has the ability to run out that Wilderness Reclamation. Of course, Brad has the answer here to Teferi Time Raveler, likely running it out and ticking it up.
Stand by and watch.
There's Teferi Time Raveler hitting the battlefield. And like you said, minusing not really an option at this point. So plus and pass, and there's Mobilized District off the top of the library.
Yeah, curious to see what Leveratto does here. He can choose to bounce Teferi if he wants. He can also just, because he drew land number 4, he can actually just run out Wilderness Reclamation and attack Teferi Time Raveler with the Paradise Druid, get it down to 3.
Yeah, Blink of an Eye with Kicker is now available thanks to the Wilderness Reclamation as well, though he will need to handle Teferi to be able to cast it.
Right.
At least when he wants to.
And I imagine Brad's going to look to fire off the D-Spark here.
Hey, if he can get rid of that Wilderness Reclamation before anything happens, that's pretty good.
He absolutely has to here. And then because Leveratto has that mobilized district to finish off the Teferi Time Raveler, I wouldn't be surprised if Brad minuses Teferi to bounce that Paradise Druid.
Yeah. Great call, Paul. That's exactly what happened.
Oh, but Brad really needs to find some action here. He's kept, he kept kind of a risky one. It was 5 lands and 2 spells, and he has yet to find more relevant spells.
Ooh, look at that. Biogenic Ooze. Now, he's not going to be able to cast it this turn, but that is a very big problem. Thankfully for Brad, he does have D-Spark in hand, but another land off the battlefield, and the pressure's really starting to mount on Brad Nelson here. The Biogenic Ooze will create the Ooze token regardless of if D-Spark hits it, so it's still going to add to the board, and with nothing to back it up, Brad looks like he may be in big trouble.
Yeah, he's going to have to deal with Paradise Druid, an Ooze, and even a potential attack from Mobilized District. Although it is interesting, it's possible Leveratto tries to play this a little bit slower, maybe attack with Paradise Druid and play another one, and put himself in a position where he can play Biogenic Ooze and then have the protection available with Blink of an Eye.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's what he's doing here.
That's what he's doing. What a great play from Leveratto. Attacking with Paradise Druid and playing the next one. He's got the read. And look at that. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, fresh off the top of the library. Thank you very much, says Brad Nelson. That is exactly what the doctor ordered. Teferi's going to hit the battlefield now and start generating card advantage.
But this is the advantage of playing Paradise Druid and boarding those in and boarding out the Growth Spirals. Now you have creatures that can pressure the Planeswalker. Sure, Brad drew an extra card off Teferi, but Leveratto now has the ability to use one of the Paradise Druids, activate Mobilized District, and just finish off Teferi this turn.
Super powerful stuff, unless Brad found some way to interact, and he did not. Boy, that's a lot of lands for Nelson.
Yeah.
And the D-Spark with no target currently.
Oh, wow.
So this is just too tempting, right? He has to go Nissa minus and then use the untapped Paradise Druid plus the land to kill.
So the question is, how many Dovin's Vetoes are in Brad Nelson's sideboard? If he has 0, then he can just play it without fear.
2.
It looks like he has 2. So that's one thing Leveratto has to think about now. If I play Nissa and he has Dovin's Veto, then I will not be able to deal with this Teferi. If I activate the Mobilized District with Paradise Druid, I'm much more likely to be able to get this Teferi off the battlefield because it's extremely unlikely for Brad Nelson to have Tyrant Scorn in his deck after sideboard.
Wow, what a decision point here for Leveratto. The match hangs in the balance potentially.
This is a huge, huge turn. I mean, we know that it's just safe to cast this Nissa and finish off Teferi. And if he does that, Brad's going to be in a ton of trouble. Let's see what Leveratto chooses to do here.
He had it pulled out like sort of halfway on the stack and didn't cast it.
Wait, he didn't activate Mobilized District?
Oh no, this seems
Wait,
to
did
be...
he skip his combat step? Wait, what's happening?
No, he's choosing attackers right now, but he did not fire up the Mobilized District.
And you see the pause here.
This is a disaster. Now he's stuck sending both Paradise Druids.
But this doesn't get the job done. This only gets Teferi down to 1.
Leaving Teferi at 1. And he now can't cast Nissa Who Shakes the World or Biogenic Ooze, and he has to pass the turn back.
And Brad has found Dovin's Veto for the Nissa this turn. He now has both answers, and he has a Thought Erasure.
What a turn of events in Brad Nelson's favor. He literally had Nissa dragged out over the battlefield. Right. If he would have gone for it, he would have been in such good position to win this game.
Alternatively, if you're not going to do that, I thought he was definitely going to activate Mobilized District here to finish off Teferi. And, you know, Teferi's still going to die this turn, but it has given Brad additional answers. He now has dealt with the Biogenic Ooze, has the Veto for the Nissa as well, and a D-Spark for a potential, you know, Wilderness Reclamation or Tameo off the top.
Wow. Brad Nelson says, so you're telling me I got a chance, because that was the door opening for him where it could have slammed shut last turn. Now, I don't necessarily blame Leveratto for not making the Nissa play like you said, but boy, letting that Teferi sit has drawn Brad into Dovin's Veto, and now he actually has answers in hand. Now, that being said, he does need to do something about these Paradise Druids at some point.
Yeah, Brad Nelson is extremely flooded here, and I'm wondering if now is the time for Leveratto to play out this Nissa. He now has the ability to protect it with Blink of an Eye, if Brad has something like a D-Spark, but of course we also know that Brad has a Dovin's Veto in hand.
Go ahead.
I wonder if he's just going to run it out or wait till he draws a negate.
Yeah, he's going to run it right out there, and Brad is priced into using Dovin's Veto here to make sure that there's no 3/3 land animated at all, even though he did have an answer for Nissa in the form of D-Spark. Still, here's 4.
Brad just wants an Elite Guard Mage, something to get in the way. Elite Guard Mage would be perfect here. It keeps the Paradise Druids in check, but this is a card.
Yeah, Narset Parter of Veil says, I get to dig around and try to find something here, so let's see if Brad can find something to just get in the way of these pesky 2/1s.
Well, unlikely to find it here with Narset. I guess Oath of Kaya would also be a nice card to have.
Yeah, something like that would be fine.
Pad the life total, deal with one of the Druids, and let's take a look at what he's looking at.
He's found a Teferi or a Duress, but he just does not have enough action right now. And it feels like taking the defensive stance with Duress would be too conservative, so he's going to go for Teferi. Yeah, and he's even got the mana to cast Teferi this turn, so beautiful turn here for Brad Nelson. At the very minimum, putting up a bunch of Planeswalkers that Leveratto's going to have to attack.
Yeah, and I imagine this time Leveratto's going to use that Mobilized District. Actually, he can just kind of do everything. He can activate Mobilized District, send Mobilized District and Paradise Druid to finish off Esper Hero of Dominaria, and then use the other Paradise Druid to get Narset down to 1, so Brad won't get that activation.
He draws Search for his Kanto off the top of the library, but you still have to feel like he's got his hands full with these Planeswalkers on board and is going to want to prioritize those.
A lot of different options here for Leveratto.
Yeah, he also has Nexus of Fate.
Yeah, he could consider just playing it, although if he does, I mean, he gets one attack in with the Paradise Druid, and that's about it. Yeah. It might be wiser to wait on the Nexus of Fate after you get that Search for Azcanta in play and get it going.
Still, the Mobilized District play looks pretty compelling here, as it effectively deals with both Planeswalkers, though. That doesn't look like what he's doing. He's going to send Teferi back to hand with Callous Dismissal. And let's see what his game plan, how it unfolds here. This does mean that it forces Brad, if he wanted to, have to tap a bunch of mana next turn to do it again, and he can get Narset off the battlefield.
Okay, so now he can get Narset off the battlefield, still run out Search, and still keep up Blink of an Eye this turn.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, kept his options the most open and got a Planeswalker off the battlefield. Unfortunately for him, Teferi likely to hit the battlefield right back again this turn. And as it turns out, Narset also was the draw step here for Brad. And one thing about when you're flooding out, when you do find action off the top of your library, you usually have enough mana to cast it.
Oh, yeah. And these Paradise Druids have done so much work. It just killing all the Planeswalkers that Brad puts into play. So, you know, oftentimes what ends up happening is Brad plays a Planeswalker, finds a card, and then the Planeswalker dies.
So here's Narset hitting the battlefield -2. He's going to cast this first to get maximum information. He gets to look at the top 4. And he found a replacement Narset, so the chain of Narset of the Narset Parter of Veils does not end and won't anytime soon. And then there's that Teferi Hero of Dominaria hitting the battlefield once again for Nelson. This has been a good game. Nice little back and forth, a close one here to decide it.
Yeah, Brad simply just needs to find a threat, and that was big. He can use Hostage Taker to steal one of the Paradise Druids and then replay it.
Yeah, he'll have to wait a turn to do so, and he'll have to hope that Leveratto taps them, but I think he's good for it.
Yeah, and this might be the turn here. Now you see Brad pulling further and further ahead on cards with both Teferi and Narset. He might need to just fire off this Nexus of Fate. I mean, Search for Azcanta has to be extremely close to flipping, if not already.
Yeah, I bet you it is. It could have been part of the reason for the Callous Dismissal as well.
I think you want to keep that. I mean,
oh, he binned it.
Okay, so he actually did not have the cards to flip Search for Azcanta that turn.
Yep, so that means, and of course that Nexus of Fate doesn't help in that regard either, as it gets shuffled.
And it looks like Leveratto is just going to look to kill all of the Planeswalkers this turn with this activation.
It's a pretty good plan. I mean, just Brad does have a lot more going on, but this is pretty nice. He's got 8 power spread out just the right way so that he can do 5 to one and 3 to the other.
There we're going to see any combination of 5 and 3 damage here to finish off both Teferi and Narset. Brad still has additional gas here. He does have Narset that can help him dig for more spells. And then the Hostage Taker is going to be the really, really key card in allowing Brad to have some ways to protect additional Planeswalkers that he might face. Oh, what
Plan
is this?
B, never mind the Planeswalkers. It's a 2-turn clock, and Leveratto is going to the face. This is an attack for 8 damage, and he says, I could just kill you, but boy, that's a huge risk to take against an opponent with Narset on 3 and Teferi on 5.
I mean, the general rule of thumb, whenever you play against Planeswalker decks, is if you can't kill them right away, you want to kill the Planeswalkers. And now Brad has so many cards to dig through. He's got the minus on the Narset and the plus on the Teferi with Hostage Taker, with all the interactive spells. So, I mean, I think Brad, it's going to be very likely for him to find all the tools here to stabilize.
I would be shocked if this line of play worked out for Leveratto. A very risky move, and it may backfire on him here, given the amount of resources that Brad has access to before the turn started, but particularly after.
Yeah, and also, based on the way that Leveratto tapped, he actually can't even cast Blink of an Eye this turn. He could have tapped the Blast Zone instead of an island.
Awkward.
So I think one of the primary things that Brad wants to do here, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised here if he does go with the Hostage Taker to steal Paradise Druid just to make sure he has ways to protect the Planeswalkers. If Leveratto did have Blink of an Eye, he could have bounced that Hostage Taker in response, assuming Brad played out a bunch of other spells. But it looks like Brad playing it safe here, starting with the Teferi, although Leveratto doesn't have any colored mana untapped, so he can't really do anything.
Right. Teferi Time Raveler hits the battlefield. That's what Brad found off of Narset Parter of Veils. He still has the activation of Teferi Hero of Dominaria available as well, but Hostage Taker looks pretty tempting at this point. Yeah, but this line of play has allowed Brad to just play defense against these creatures. He's going to use Time Raveler to return one of the Paradise Druids, and all he needs to do is put out some other way to block or get in the way, and no longer lethal here for Leveratto, even with the Mobilized District.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like Leveratto really just wanted to put Brad on a 2-turn clock there. Attack, untap, cast Nexus of Fate, and try to just end the game as quickly as possible.
And here's the brutal Hostage Taker that is going to really throw a wrench in the works here for Leveratto. He took that big attack step last time, got Brad fairly low down to 6 life, but look at this turn from Brad. This is kind of what you would expect by letting your opponent have those 2 Planeswalkers.
Yeah, and look at the board now. Brad Neslin with 3 Planeswalkers in play, enough blockers to deal with what Leveratto has, and I think this has slipped away here for Leveratto.
Another Search for Azcanta drawn here. The Teferi Hero of Dominaria put Search for Azcanta back in the library there for Leveratto. He just drew another one immediately. That is the only unknown card, though, if you're sitting in Brad Nelson's seat, and he looks content with the way that this game's gone. You know, I think he's pretty happy about that attack.
Think about what's happened over the course of this game. I mean, he drew so many lands early, but was able to hang on because those Planeswalkers absorbed so much of that damage. I mean, he could already be dead at this point, but, you know, Narset finding a card, and then that's 3 less damage that he's taking, and that's all added up. And, you know, Leveratto playing this interesting combination of being overly conservative when not playing that Nissa when he could have, and then overly aggressive the turn before to try to end it with Nexus of Fate. I mean, you know, it's those, you know, those small decision points where it could have gone the other way. And I know if you lose this game, this is where you go, man, you look back at those spots and go, should I have done the other thing?
That's right. I mean, yeah, we should rewind back to that moment where Leveratto takes Nissa from his hand, hovers it over the battlefield, and ultimately changes his mind, and then perhaps a misclick there by not firing up the mobilize.
If he plays Nissa there, he wins the game.
He wins the game. Like, that was going to be it. He didn't win that turn, but he was so far ahead, and Brad had so little going on, it would have been extremely difficult. Now, I think you could make a good strategic argument for not playing the Nissa there,
but if you
then
don't,
you had to do the mobilize.
Then
district.
You have to activate the mobilize district, because remember, there's no way Brad has Tyrant Scorn in his deck after sideboarding here.
But now, as we said, that attack last turn passed the turn back to Nelson, and he has gone absolutely nuts on this board in the meantime with the triple Planeswalker, 2 creatures, and a brutal turn there for Leveratto.
And yeah, Brad has now officially stabilized. He's got Teferi going. Narset is going to slow down Leveratto's card draw effects here. Those Memorial to Geniuses aren't going to really be doing a whole lot. Teferi also slowing things down, and Brad with, you know, Veto and D-Spark for any threat Leveratto might draw. So things are going to be extremely difficult here for Matias.
Oath of Kaya into hand here for Nelson as he starts going through the motions. Now he does have an opponent sitting at a cool 20 life, so he's got a bit of work to do. But it feels like he's going to be able to navigate given the on-board and in-hand advantages that he has.
Yeah, Leveratto does have the option of putting a couple of counters onto Blast Zone and getting both Narset and Teferi Time Raveler off the battlefield, which is pretty strong, but he still has to deal with this big Teferi that's in play. The only thing that Brad at this point needs to be really concerned about is Search for Azcanta. You know, Search for Azcanta, if it flips, it will give Leveratto a continuous source of card advantage every single turn. And once it flips, Brad Nelson's deck doesn't really have any answer to that.
Yeah, we saw that before when he used Big Teferi to put Search for Azcanta back into the library, and there is still one there.
I think he might actually play Teferi, bounce Search for Azcanta, and then Dovin's Veto it, because that might be one of the few ways that he can lose.
But he will have to face another one, not next turn, but the turn after, I believe.
Right.
So it's like, does he just have to churn through them? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, Brad's just trying to identify what the ways are that exist that he can lose to.
I see.
And I think it's flip Search for Azcanta, finding Leveratto the perfect sequence of cards to maybe get back into this.
So the Dovin's Veto is one way that he can slow things down. Also, Brad has now officially completely cleared the way. There is still Mobilized District that could threaten Planeswalkers. So Brad is going to decline to attack with his 2 creatures before passing the turn back.
And we're going to see Blast Zone go up to 3 counters here. Leveratto playing 3 copies of this card along with Mobilized District here. So 4 colorless lands in his deck. And as a result, that's why you see Simic Guildgate in there to be able to actually cast all of his spells.
Well, the good news for Leveratto is that he can resolve a Search for Azcanta this turn, even though this one might get countered. He can opt into the one that's on top of his library and cast it, but Brad just says, sure, you've got another one anyway.
And Leveratto getting those Planeswalkers off the battlefield. He doesn't want Narset to get an additional activation. He doesn't want Brad Nelson to play a Duress or Thought Erasure at instant speed on his draw step.
Speaking of,
there it is.
Thought Erasure off the top of the library for Nelson. But wait, there's more. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria plus. Finds a land. Well, Brad has a purely reactive hand at this point. Counterspell, Hand Disruption, and a couple of removal spells.
Yeah, it's going to take a little more time before he can actually fully take over the game.
Yeah.
But he is very ahead on cards here. But he's gone through a lot of his deck. I'm actually
Really
kind of
has.
curious how many cards there are left in his deck. Probably gone through at least half of it by now. Brad Nelson weighing whether or not he wants to attack with Hostage Taker. If Leveratto wants to try to kill Teferi with Mobilized District, he would be basically taking his entire turn off to do so.
And Brad's going to dare him. And plus, on top of all that, Brad has Paradise Druid to just chump block if he'd like to maintain more loyalty on Teferi.
Yeah. Brad actually holding on to Thought Erasure, not using it quite yet.
And here's Opt for Leveratto.
Yeah, wanting to fill that graveyard up.
Wow, lots of search for his Cantus. He puts one on the bottom of the library and then draws one anyway.
Okay.
But there we go. Search for his Kenta is transformed, and Biogenic Ooze was the draw step.
Is it time? This does not allow him to play Biogenic Ooze, although I think he's more interested in just activating Askanta the Sunken Ruin.
So he's going to run out Paradise Druid, but as you mentioned, leaves him only the one green source, so no Ooze this turn. And he's just going to pass the turn back to Nelson. What did Nelson find? Another land?
No, that was a big draw. It was Hero of Precinct 1. So now he can start actually pressuring Leveratto. He's got the Hero with the Thought Erasure, and now he's actually able to develop a board here.
Nice draw step there for Nelson, as he has been waiting for a way to start actually applying that pressure. He's had the card advantage engine rolling for a little while with Teferi, but
yeah, and this is the advantage of playing Hero Precinct 1, right? If you're playing the pure Esper control deck, this game could have gone on for much, much longer. But because Brad has access to Hero Precinct 1, he can kind of expedite that process, because if he ever just does find that Hero Precinct 1, I mean, playing against especially the Simic Nexus deck, no real answers to that creature. And given that Brad Nelson has found Mortify here, he can safely attack with his creatures, because if Leveratto does choose to activate Mobilized District, Brad Nelson can then fire off Mortify to kill the creature land.
yeah, if I'm Brad Nelson, I'm definitely interested in starting to get the job done here. You know, opponent with an active Askanta the Sunken Ruin and some of the big haymakers up top, like what Leveratto has, I don't think I'd want to have this game go much longer if possible. Start limiting the draw steps for Leveratto. He's got him down to 14. And here's Oath of Kaya. Wow, Brad took that very seriously. He definitely wants to get him dead. He's going to go upstairs with Oath.
Yeah, try to end this game as quickly as possible. Askanta the Sunken Ruin is still a little scary.
All right, let's see what he finds. Well, there's a Tamiyo and a Narset.
Well, he's hit 4 cards.
Yeah.
Curious to see what he goes for here. Narset is a nice way to actually kind of slow down the Teferi
Yeah,
that
that's
Brad
true.
has going, because that is his card advantage engine. He would have to minus Teferi to get that Narset off the battlefield. So Narset doesn't seem like a horrible choice. However, Brad does have a pretty big army of creatures, so Narset might just get taken down just by attacks.
He's actually going to go for Tamiyo, Collector of Tales. He does have Pyogenic Ooze in the yard. Ooh, there's a Nexus of Fate off the top of the library as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any consideration for just passing and trying to bait a counter with an end-step Nexus of Fate, which then gives you some more flexibility on the next turn, because if Brad doesn't counter it, then you know you can try to resolve spells over the course of 2 turns instead of 1.
As it stands, though, he's just going to run out Tamiyo And this is kind of brutal for him because not only does he get countered with Dovin's Veto, but that's yet another 1-1 attacker on the other side of the battlefield. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. And Leveratto's at 11. He's going to be getting hot under the collar here because Brad Nelson's starting to apply major pressure on board at this point.
Absolutely. This Brad Nelson is basically going to be making a big attack here and going to put Leveratto on a 2-turn clock.
That's right. Plus Teferi, another Teferi in hand, plus Godless Shrine this turn. That Mortify and Despark also at the ready for any emergency measures that Brad may need.
And at this point, Brad, again, when you see a world-class player here and you look at the board and you look at what's in play and in his hand, you think, okay, now you just do what you need to do and attack. But Brad, at this point, what he's really thinking about are the possible ways that he can lose here. It's like, okay, what can he string together here for me to possibly lose this game? And I just need to make sure I see all the angles here because I'm so far ahead. I'm so likely to win over the course of the next 2 turns. I just need to make sure that I can think of every possible card that Leveratto could have in hand. I mean, it helps that he knows 3 of those cards. But yeah, here it is.
Everybody,
a huge attack.
Yeah, everything, and even the Hero of Precinct 1, which is going to get blocked by the Paradise Druid. But this is still an attack for 7, which would leave Leveratto at a lowly 4 life with currently no board state. So he's going to fire off blink of an eye on his own Paradise Druid, effectively drawing him 2 cards, although one of them is Paradise Druid.
And now Brad Nelson can choose to use Mortify here in Paradise Druid if he really wants to make an additional token to ensure that he does put Leveratto on a 2-turn clock here. He's going to get in for 5 this turn, get him to 6, and yeah, it looks like that's what he wants to do.
Yeah, and it makes good sense. It lets him keep an additional 2 power on the battlefield
and the hero
while adding 1, exactly. So, boom, down goes the opposing Paradise Druid, but he gets 1 back in his hand and then draws a 3rd copy of Nexus of Fate. You see him running the count there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, I can start casting Nexus of Fate, but as we've outlined many times throughout the course of the weekend, Nexus of Fate with nothing going on the battlefield, not where you want to be.
Exactly. I mean, Leveratto's probably going to fire off a Nexus of Fate, but it's just not going to do anything.
This one may be just about over. Leveratto with a bumpy game 3. This has been a tough one. Here's Thought Erasure now from Brad Nelson, who may be on the verge of cruising into the top 4, having yet to lose a match in MPL Weekly play or here at Mythic Championship 3. He has a reputation for his prowess in Standard, and he's kind of showing it.
Yeah. Wilderness Reclamation wouldn't even be an out here because Brad Nelson has that Despark in hand.
Right, he's kept it the whole time, and a Blast Zone can't take care of the 0 converted mana cost tokens under any circumstance.
As Blast Zone comes into play with 1 counter.
Yeah, it seems like that would be a bonus, but there's a lot of times where you would much prefer it to be 0. So now it's desperation mode time for Leveratto. He has to just start firing off Nexus of Fate and hoping he finds something, because he has nothing going on the battlefield outside of lands currently.
If he finds a land, he can play Paradise Druid and then play Nexus of Fate, but that's not going to do much either. And at this point, I think this is just going to be the game. I mean, Leveratto's probably going to have to just cast another Nexus of Fate and see what he draws, but at this point, Brad Nelson has just amassed too big of an army with that Hero of Precinct 1.
Huge army on the side of Brad Nelson. He stares intently at the screen, waiting for his opponent to act, because Brad is on the verge of top 4. And he's even going to chat him up a little bit here, it looks like, down the stretch. You know they're feeling the nerves, but it's never,
Brad
Nelson
would totally be putting on the sunglasses right now if he could. Borrow them from Shahar.
Yeah, he must have not had the prescriptions right, know, for his for his glasses there. So Leveratto just counting things up and seeing, is there a string, some combination of cards that could possibly keep me alive from the next turn? He's going to go for Blast Zone. No, Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, excuse me.
He boarded out all his root snares. Oh, and yeah, I mean, that was a card he was looking for. He doesn't know Brad Nelson has Despark.
I don't have my things. All right. I have everything.
Okay.
So
sure.
Brad figured out what was going on without actually knowing.
Oh, I can't hear you, though.
No. Okay. I will play a Reclamation.
I can't hear you.
cannot hear me.
So we'll get a tournament official just to make sure that everything goes cleanly here. Paul, can you explain why Brad needs to hear Leveratto right now?
Yeah, Brad needs to hear anytime Wilderness Reclamation or any other card that has a triggered effect on either combat step or end step occurs, you need to announce it to give your opponent the option or the ability to set a stop so that they can respond. Here, with Wilderness Reclamation, Brad Nelson has the answer in D-Spark and needs to set a stop prior to end step to be able to kill it.
And once he does, the game is going to end, and that is Brad Nelson firing off a D-Spark and winning the match. He is on to the top 4. Congratulations, Brad, showing utter dominance of the format and the field here at Mythic Championship.
I mean, when you combine his record from the MPL Spark Split along with this tournament, he is undefeated. He's the only player who could potentially just run the table and not pick up a single loss.
It's incredible, too, because when you play the MPL weekly events, you're only playing against other MPL members specifically, which, of course, is the upper crust of competitive Magic players in the world. And then you come in here, and he's just like, win, top 4, no problem.
Yeah, and it's just incredible how he was able to navigate that last game and come up with the victory because, I mean, honestly, he kept a 5-land hand with 2 spells, and over the course of his next 6 or 7 draw steps, he drew 1 spell. And somehow he still was able to stay in that game and ultimately take over when Leveratto made that big attack and chose not to kill his Planeswalkers.
Yeah, it's incredible. And again, I mentioned it before, but Brad, he has this reputation for being good at Standard. And the last time we heard from him on the air, he was like, well, I just got lucky, just picked my decks at random. And hey, I happened to get there and the players were better than me, but I got that, and it's like, come on, dude.
Yeah, it's just not true. I know he likes to kind of talk himself down a little bit, but I mean, he has that reputation, and frankly, it's just the truth. He is one of, if not the best Standard player in the world.
That's right. And, the truth of it is that, look, as competitive Magic players, they're trained, right, not to be results-oriented, not to look at it and say, just because I win a lot, that means I'm the best. Fair enough. That's a good thing. But I'll tell you what. If you weren't one of, if not the best players, you wouldn't be capable of doing the things that he's done over the course of the last, say, month and a half to 2 months. I'm sorry, you cannot get that lucky to just go 7-0 and then cruise through the tournament here as well.
Yeah, I mean, so what separates kind of the best players is not only do they play perfectly, they also put themselves in positions to get lucky. It's like playing to your outs. It's like, okay, these are the things that I need to do to make sure that I give myself a chance to win. And you saw that in the last game. Every single turn, it's like, all right, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do. I need to not die. These Paradise Druids, they're kicking my butt, but I'm going to continue playing these Planeswalkers, chaining them together, and hope I can find a way to kind of turn it around. And he was able to. I mean, that one huge turn where he went to Fairy, draw a card, thought erasure you, and have the counter magic up for your next play, that was huge.
That was massive, and he got over the line. Brad's in the top 4, and he is with Becca right now.
That's right, Marshall. I'm here with Brad. And Brad, I need you to talk me through how it feels. You just walked in here, won 3 matches because you went undefeated 7-0 in the Spark Split. How do you do that?
I don't know. One match at a time, honestly. That you can't do more than that. So, I don't know how I'm doing it. I don't know why my quote-unquote good matchup was my hardest matchup of the day, but I'm here, and I finally get to play on Sunday stage. It's been quite a few years.
Well, that's amazing. Tell me what you're going to do when you get back to your hotel room tonight. What's the thought process? Do you take a long bath? How do you prepare for tomorrow?
Troll my friend Brian. That's pretty much all I do ever. But no, seriously, I will look over the matches. I'll talk to my team. And I'm the kind of person that likes to just try to get it out of my head and just get a good night's sleep and relax. It didn't work last night. I was up till 1. But I don't want to put too much stress in that time. I mean, today and tomorrow, I will just be frantic around the hall and running around because that's just my method. But tonight, I'm just going to relax and take it really easy.
Absolutely. Well-deserved because you've had to play less matches than anyone else because you just keep winning them. It's very impressive.
Thank you. It was weird, though, like just coming in and playing these matches like that was my first feature match. Those were my first matches. Like every one of my opponents was here already. So it was such a weird feeling for me to like just be like shaking off, the day one jitters today. But I got through my matches. So that's all I know right now.
Well, we're impressed, and we can't wait to see what you do tomorrow. Brad Nelson is one step closer to that trophy. We'll be right back.
My name is Eric Froelich. I'm in the Magic Pro League and the Magic Pro Tour Hall of Fame. It just so happened that my entire 5th grade class really just started getting into Magic. I wanted to go to the local game store. I went with my dad and we bought a nice little starter kit at the time. My dad ended up reading the entire rulebook, teaching me how to play, and I played with my classmates. I ended up finding myself winning and advancing all the way to the top 8 and qualifying for the Pro Tour at 13 years old. And at that point, I was just fully immersed in wanting to go to every major tournament around me. And that's what I did. I was lucky enough to have really supportive parents who found a way to make sure everything I needed to go to, I was there.
Down to 3, Ben, that's gonna do it!
I'm Javier Dominguez from Spain. I'm the 2018 World Champion, and I'm a Magic Pro League competitor. I think what I like most about Magic is that you can play a lot of games, and the games are different between themselves. The game still keeps surprising you. Like, you play the game and you run into new situations. I really feel the support of my family, my friends, my girlfriend, Spanish community. It means a lot to me because they're always trying to watch every game I play. This support means a lot because I feel like it gives me strength.
I'm Jean-Emmanuel Deprat, 24 years old, from Paris. I'm part of the Magic Pro League. I was taught the game by a cousin when I was 11. Then I started going to a local game store in Paris, and then I started going to PTQs. So after winning any major tournaments like the World Magic Cup, usually the first person I let know is my mom. When I found out I was going to be in the MPL and a full-time professional player, she was delighted. My mom believes that you should work in something that makes you happy.
So Mike Segrist holding his breath, and Francesco says,
Hey, I'm Mike Segrist, and I'm part of the Magic Pro League. I started playing Magic when I was 5th or 6th grade. My stepbrother at the time found like a $20 bill on the ground, and it was next to a game store, and he bought 4th edition like double starter deck. He brought it over to my house, and we played, and I was hooked. It has been a challenge trying to stay at the top levels, and my wife's been excellent in it, and you know, she gives me time to play when she gets home from work. She always knows that I need to stay on top of my game.
I'm Greg Kowalski, I'm 27, I'm from Poland, and I will be playing MPL. I play the Magic with friends, like going to pre-releases, play FNMs. At some point, I had progress in Magic, and now I'm here. I have a great support in terms of parents cheering for me. Even though they don't understand a single thing about Magic, they're still cheering for me. They see standings.
Hey everybody, welcome back to coverage of Mythic Championship 3. While we are working our way towards our top 4 of this tournament, let's find out where we were in our upper bracket earlier today. Jean-Emmanuel Deprat versus Shahar Shenhar on mono red took that 2-0. Then of course Matias Leveratto versus Brad Nelson. We just saw this one, Simic Nexus versus Esper Hero. Brad Nelson wins that. So the 2 players already locked for our top 4. Let's take a look at that. Shahar Shenhar, the 2-time world champion, and Brad Nelson, the MPL division winner. Can he go all the way? Well, we've got to find 2 people to join him before we can answer that question. So let's take a look at our lower bracket. Coming up next, we've got Li Shitian versus John Rolfe. Li Shitian is on Azorius aggro, John Rolfe on Esper control. He quit his career as a lawyer, John Rolfe, to join the MPL and prove himself, and now he has an opportunity. Shota Yasuoka versus Kai Budit is what we're gonna see coming up next. This is Esper control versus Esper Hero. 2 Pro Tour wins versus 7 Pro Tour wins, 2 immense giants of the game. I wouldn't go anywhere if I was you. This is the matchup that we have all been waiting for. It's going to be some great Magic, and Day 9 and Cedric are going to preview it for us.
Thank you so much, Maria. Yes, Shota Yasuoka versus Kai Buddha. Whoo! And this is a spicy one, too. We got a pair of Bolus's Citadels in Yasuoka's deck. What do you think about this matchup?
Well, you took away my thunder a little bit there. This is the card actually that is kind of